The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 1. A Curious Find. The late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of Mr. Thompson's Antiques Emporium, casting long shadows across the cluttered shop. Miss Marple sat in her usual armchair by the fireplace at home later that evening, examining her latest acquisition, a rather ordinary-looking desk calendar from the year 1923. Such an unassuming little thing, she murmured to herself, adjusting her spectacles. The leather-bound calendar was indeed quite plain, its brown cover cracked with age. But something about it had caught her eye during her visit to the shop earlier that day. Perhaps it was the way Mr. Thompson had hastily tucked it behind a stack of yellowing newspapers when she entered. Miss Marple recalled how his fingers had trembled slightly as he rang up her purchase of a delicate china teacup. "Just this old calendar too, please," she had said casually, watching with interest as a flicker of what could only be described as panic crossed the elderly shopkeeper's face before he quickly masked it with a forced smile. Now, sitting in the comfort of her own drawing room, Miss Marple carefully opened the calendar. The pages were brittle with age, and the scent of old paper filled the air as she turned them one by one. At first glance, there appeared to be nothing remarkable, just the usual dates and days of the week printed in neat rows. But then she noticed them. Small pencil marks in the corners of certain dates, almost invisible unless one looked very closely. "Most peculiar," she whispered, reaching for her magnifying glass. Under closer inspection, the marks revealed themselves to be tiny symbols, circles, triangles, and dashes arranged in varying patterns. On some pages, there were numbers written in the margin in different handwriting styles, sometimes neat copperplate, other times a hurried scrawl. Her mind drifted back to the war years, when she had observed similar coded messages being exchanged between Mrs. Hargreaves, the local postmistress, and various strangers who claimed to be collecting stamps for charity. It had all seemed perfectly innocent until the mysterious disappearance of several important military documents from the nearby base. A sudden knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Setting the calendar aside, she rose to answer it, only to find young Constable Peters standing on her doorstep, looking unusually flustered. "Miss Marple," he began, twisting his helmet nervously in his hands, "I'm afraid there's been an incident at Mr. Thompson's shop. He's gone missing." "Missing?" Miss Marple repeated, her sharp blue eyes narrowing. "How extraordinary. And when exactly did anyone last see him?" "Just this afternoon," the constable replied. "Right after you left, actually. Several customers came by later but found the shop locked up tight. We've searched everywhere, his flat above the shop, his sister's house in the village." As the young man continued speaking, Miss Marple's gaze drifted back to the old calendar lying on her side table. Something told her that these two events, the mysterious markings in the calendar and Mr. Thompson's sudden disappearance, were somehow connected. Perhaps the calendar wasn't just an ordinary antique after all. "I wonder," she said thoughtfully, interrupting the constable's report, "if you might have someone look into Mr. Thompson's past. His family history, previous places of employment. Oh, and do ask about any connections he might have had to the intelligence services during the war years." The constable blinked in surprise. "The intelligence services? But why would you think—" Miss Marple smiled gently. "My dear boy, in my experience, when antiques dealers start behaving strangely about seemingly innocuous items, there's usually more to the story than meets the eye. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe I shall make us some tea while you send those inquiries along." As she bustled off to the kitchen, her mind was already working through the possibilities. The calendar's code was clearly meant to convey information, but to whom? And why would Mr. Thompson, a simple antiques dealer, be involved in such matters? Returning with the tea tray, she noticed something she had missed before, a small embossed logo on the calendar's back cover. It depicted a phoenix rising from flames with the initials VR beneath it. The same symbol, she recalled, had once appeared on the stationery of a gentleman's club in London, where several high-ranking government officials were known to meet. "This is getting more interesting by the minute," she murmured, pouring the tea. 10 chapters worth of mystery, to be precise, though she couldn't yet see how they would unfold. But then again, as Miss Marple often reminded herself, The most fascinating mysteries always revealed themselves one careful observation at a time. The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 2. Threads of the Past. The following morning, Miss Marple found herself once again at Mr. Thompson's Antiques Emporium, this time accompanied by Constable Peters and a locksmith. The shop's windows were dark, their usual displays of curiosities shrouded in shadow, giving the establishment an air of abandonment that sent a peculiar shiver down her spine. "Odd," she remarked as they stepped inside. "Mr. Thompson always kept his shop so meticulously tidy, but look at this." She gestured to the counter where papers were scattered haphazardly and a teacup sat half full, its contents now cold and stale. "It's as though he left in great haste." Constable Peters nodded grimly. "The back door was unlocked too, miss, and there's no sign of forced entry anywhere." Miss Marple wandered deeper into the shop, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. On one shelf, she noticed a collection of old postcards arranged in what appeared to be a deliberate order, each stamped with dates from the early 1920s. One card in particular caught her attention. It bore an image of St. Mary Mead's Church, but on the back was written a single phrase, "Phoenix rises." Her thoughts immediately returned to the embossed phoenix symbol on the calendar. Could these words be connected? She slipped the postcard into her handbag for further examination later, making a mental note to cross-reference the date on the card with the coded markings in the calendar. As she continued her inspection, something else struck her as unusual. In the far corner of the shop, behind a heavy oak cabinet, she spotted a thin trail of dust disturbed along the floorboards. Dropping to her knees, she ran her fingers over the woodwork and discovered a small brass keyhole almost completely hidden by the cabinet's shadow. "Constable," she called softly, "do you happen to have a flashlight?" Peters hurried over, handing her a torch. Its beam revealed faint scratches around the keyhole, suggesting recent use. Miss Marple frowned thoughtfully. "I believe Mr. Thompson may have been hiding something here. A secret compartment, perhaps?" The constable produced a set of lock-picking tools from his kit, and within moments the hidden panel clicked open. Inside, they found a bundle of yellowed letters tied with faded red ribbon, along with a small leather-bound notebook. Miss Marple carefully untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. It was addressed to someone named V.R. and signed simply, "Yours faithfully, A.T." "A.T.," she murmured, tucking the letter back into place. Could that stand for Arthur Thompson, or perhaps another individual entirely? She handed the bundle to Constable Peters. "We'll need to examine these more closely, preferably under better lighting." Before leaving the shop, Miss Marple paused by the display case near the window. Among the antique trinkets lay a silver pocket watch engraved with yet another phoenix emblem. This time, however, the bird was encircled by the Latin phrase, "Tempus revelat omnia." Time reveals all things. "How curious," she said aloud, though more to herself than to anyone else. Turning to Peters, she added, "You must ask Mrs. Hargreaves, the former postmistress, if she recalls any correspondence involving this same symbol during the war years, and see if you can locate anyone who might have known Mr. Thompson prior to his arrival in St. Mary Mead." Back at home later that afternoon, Miss Marple spread the contents of the hidden compartment across her dining table. The notebook proved especially intriguing. Its pages were filled with cryptic notes, some written in shorthand, others in various foreign languages. Interspersed among them were sketches of symbols identical to those in the calendar, circles, triangles, dashes, all meticulously labeled with corresponding numbers or letters. One page stood out in particular. At the top, someone had scrawled the words Operation Phoenix in bold ink. Beneath it was a list of names, each marked with either a check mark or a cross. Several entries included brief annotations. "Reliable courier, Red 1. Another stated, compromised, terminate contact." Miss Marple leaned back in her chair, tapping her chin thoughtfully. Operation Phoenix. The name echoed ominously in her mind. Was this merely a wartime code name, or did it signify something ongoing, something dangerous enough to prompt Mr. Thompson's sudden disappearance? Her musings were interrupted by the arrival of Gladys, her housekeeper, bearing a tray of tea and biscuits. Setting it down, Gladys remarked, Oh, I nearly forgot. That young woman from the village stopped by earlier, the one who works at the library. She said she found something you might find interesting. Really? Miss Marple asked, intrigued. What is it? She mentioned an old newspaper clipping about a fire at a gentleman's club in London back in 23. The same year as your calendar, isn't it? Apparently several members went missing after the blaze. Miss Marple's heart quickened. A fire in 1923, the very year of the calendar, and now a reference to missing members of a club bearing the same phoenix insignia. Coincidence? She thought not. Thank you, Gladys, she said, rising from her seat. I think I shall pay a visit to the library tomorrow. There are still many threads to unravel, but I believe we're beginning to see the shape of the tapestry. That evening, as she settled into her armchair with a cup of chamomile tea, Miss Marple reflected on the day's discoveries. The calendar, the postcard, the notebook, all pieces of a puzzle that seemed to stretch back decades. Yet amidst the tangled web of clues, one thing was certain: Mr. Thompson's disappearance was no random event. Someone, or something, had drawn him into a game far larger than he could have imagined. And now Miss Marple realized she too had been pulled into that game. Whether by chance or design, the secrets of the old calendar were hers to uncover. 8 chapters remained, and already the stakes felt perilously high. The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 3. The Library's Whisper. The next morning, Miss Marple arrived at St. Mary Mead's modest library with her usual air of quiet determination. The building, a quaint stone structure nestled between the village bakery and the post office, exuded an aura of scholarly calm. Yet today, Miss Marple sensed that even the most unassuming corners of this peaceful town might hold secrets waiting to be unearthed. The young librarian, Miss Emily Cartwright, greeted her warmly. Miss Marple, I've set aside some materials for you, just as you requested. She gestured toward a small table near the window where a stack of old newspapers and ledgers lay neatly arranged. Thank you, my dear, Miss Marple replied, settling into a chair. You mentioned something about a fire in London back in 1923. Emily nodded, her eyes bright with curiosity. Yes, it was quite the scandal at the time. A gentleman's club called the Phoenix Society burned down under mysterious circumstances. Several prominent members reportedly perished in the blaze, though there were rumors that not all of them were actually present that night. Miss Marple raised an eyebrow. How intriguing. And what became of the survivors, or those who claimed to survive? That's the curious part, Emily said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Some of them vanished shortly afterward. Others, well, they seemed to fade into obscurity. There was even talk of espionage, but nothing was ever proven. As Emily spoke, Miss Marple sifted through the clippings. One article stood out, a grainy photograph of the smouldering ruins of the Phoenix Society, its once grand facade reduced to blackened rubble. Beneath the image, a caption read, "Exclusive. Was this fire an accident or sabotage?" Her gaze lingered on the list of names accompanying the report. Among them was one that made her heart skip a beat. Arthur Thompson, followed by the notation, "Status unknown." So Mr. Thompson was involved, she murmured softly, more to herself than to Emily. But how does a man presumed lost in a fire reappear decades later as an antiques dealer in St. Mary Mead? Emily tilted her head thoughtfully. Perhaps he changed his identity. People did that sometimes during the war, especially if they had something to hide. Miss Marple nodded slowly. Indeed, my dear, indeed. She turned her attention to another clipping, this one detailing the aftermath of the fire. According to the article, several safe deposit boxes belonging to the Society's members had been recovered intact despite the destruction of the building itself. Their contents, however, remained classified due to national security concerns. A convenient excuse, Miss Marple mused aloud. One wonders what secrets those boxes held and whether anyone has tried to uncover them since. At that moment, the door to the library creaked open and an elderly gentleman entered. He moved slowly, leaning heavily on a cane, but his sharp eyes immediately locked onto Miss Marple. For a fleeting second, their gazes met, and she felt a jolt of recognition. not because she knew him personally, but because his face bore an uncanny resemblance to one of the men in the newspaper photograph. "Good morning," he said gruffly, approaching the circulation desk. "I'm looking for a book on local history." Miss Marple watched him closely, noting the slight tremor in his hands as he adjusted his scarf. His clothes were expensive but worn, suggesting a life of former wealth now diminished. When Emily excused herself to fetch the requested book, Miss Marple seized the opportunity to rise from her seat and approach him. "Excuse me," she began politely, "but do I detect a hint of London in your accent?" The man stiffened imperceptibly before responding. "Perhaps. I lived there many years ago." "How fascinating," Miss Marple continued, her tone light yet probing. "I've been researching the history of the Phoenix Society. Such a tragedy, that fire in 23. Do you happen to recall it?" For a brief moment, the man's composure faltered, his knuckles whitened around the handle of his cane, and his jaw tightened. Then, with visible effort, he forced a smile. "Terrible business, but I'm afraid my memory isn't what it used to be. Now, if you'll excuse me." He turned abruptly, nearly colliding with Emily as she returned with his book. Muttering a hasty thank you, he hurried out of the library, leaving behind a faint trace of cologne that smelled vaguely familiar. Miss Marple frowned thoughtfully. "Emily, could you check the records and see if we have any information on recent newcomers to the village? Specifically, gentlemen of advanced age who might have arrived within the past year or two." "Certainly," Emily replied, already reaching for the register. "But may I ask why?" "I believe our visitor may have known Mr. Thompson, or at least been connected to the same circle," Miss Marple explained. "And given the circumstances surrounding his disappearance, it seems prudent to explore every possible lead." Returning to her research, Miss Marple discovered another tantalizing clue buried in the archives. A letter to the editor, published shortly after the fire. Written by an anonymous correspondent, it accused the Phoenix Society of being a front for intelligence operations during the First World War. The writer claimed that certain members had used their positions to smuggle classified documents out of the country, using coded messages disguised as mundane correspondence. "Coded messages," Miss Marple murmured, recalling the symbols in the calendar and the notebook. Could the Phoenix Society have developed a system of communication so sophisticated that it persisted long after the war ended? And if so, had Mr. Thompson been entrusted with safeguarding or perhaps continuing that system? By late afternoon, Miss Marple decided to visit Mrs. Hargreaves, the retired postmistress whose wartime activities had once intrigued her. As she walked through the village, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Glancing over her shoulder, she spotted a figure lingering near the churchyard. A man in a dark overcoat who quickly ducked out of sight when their eyes met. "Most peculiar," she muttered under her breath. When she arrived at Mrs. Hargreaves's cottage, the elderly woman greeted her with characteristic warmth. Over cups of tea, Miss Marple delicately broached the subject of the Phoenix Society. "Ah, yes," Mrs. Hargreaves said, her expression turning wistful. "I remember those days well. We received letters from all over Europe, each marked with strange symbols. At first, we thought they were harmless codes used by stamp collectors, but then—" She hesitated, glancing toward the window as though expecting someone to appear. "Yes?" Miss Marple prompted gently. "One day, a man came to the post office claiming to be a courier. He asked about specific letters addressed to members of the Phoenix Society. When I told him we didn't handle such things directly, he grew agitated. That evening, someone broke into the sorting room, but strangely nothing was taken." Miss Marple leaned forward, her interest piqued. "Did you recognize the man?" Mrs. Hargreaves shook her head. "No, but I remember his voice. It had a clipped, authoritative tone, like a military officer, and he wore a ring with a phoenix emblem, just like the ones in your calendar." As Miss Marple left the cottage, her mind raced with possibilities. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to align, though the full picture remained elusive. 7 chapters still lay ahead, and already the web of intrigue had grown far wider than she'd anticipated. Walking home beneath the deepening twilight, she reflected on the events of the day. The fire, the coded messages, The shadowy figures watching from the sidelines all pointed to a conspiracy spanning decades. And somewhere at the heart of it lay the fate of poor Mr. Thompson, whose quiet life in St. Mary Mead had been anything but ordinary. "One thing is certain," she whispered to herself, clutching the old calendar tightly in her hand. "This is no mere game of cat and mouse. Someone out there knows exactly what happened, and they're determined to keep it hidden." The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Churchyard. The church bells tolled midnight as Miss Marple sat by her bedroom window, the old calendar spread across her lap. The moonlight bathed the pages in a silvery glow, making the cryptic symbols seem almost alive, dancing like restless spirits under her scrutiny. She had spent hours poring over the notebook from Mr. D. Thompson's hidden compartment, cross-referencing its contents with the markings in the calendar and the names listed in the newspaper clippings. Yet despite her diligence, the true nature of Operation Phoenix remained frustratingly elusive. Her thoughts drifted to the mysterious gentleman she'd encountered at the library earlier that day. Who was he, and why had he reacted so strongly to her mention of the Phoenix Society? More importantly, what connection did he have to Mr. Thompson, or to the fire that had supposedly claimed his life decades ago? A soft rustling sound outside interrupted her musings. Peering through the window, she saw a shadowy figure moving stealthily among the gravestones in the churchyard. It wasn't unusual for villagers to visit the cemetery after dark, sometimes out of grief, other times for quiet contemplation. But something about this person's movements struck her as deliberate, almost furtive. Miss Marple reached for her shawl, her curiosity outweighing any sense of caution. Grabbing a sturdy torch from the hallway table, she slipped quietly out of the house and into the cool night air. The village lay silent under the watchful gaze of the stars, its cobblestone streets deserted, save for the distant bark of a dog. As she approached the churchyard gate, the figure disappeared behind a cluster of ancient yew trees. Her footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path, and she paused to listen. The only sounds were the whispering leaves and the faint creak of the church door swinging gently in the breeze. "Good evening," she called out, her voice steady but firm. "Is someone there?" For a moment, there was no response. Then from the shadows, a man stepped forward. It was not the elderly gentleman from the library, but someone younger, taller and broad-shouldered. His face was obscured by the brim of his hat, but his posture suggested readiness, or perhaps tension. "Who are you?" he demanded, his tone clipped and authoritative. "I could ask you the same question," Miss Marple replied calmly. "You seem rather interested in our little churchyard tonight." The man hesitated, clearly weighing whether to stay or retreat. Finally, he removed his hat, revealing sharp features and piercing blue eyes. "My name is Captain Harold Langley," he said, though his accent hinted at foreign origins. "I'm here investigating certain matters related to the late Mr. Thompson." Miss Marple raised an eyebrow. "How intriguing. And who exactly sent you, Captain Langley?" "That's none of your concern," he replied curtly, "but I will say this. If you know anything about Mr. Thompson's activities or about a certain calendar, I suggest you keep it to yourself. There are forces at play here that you cannot possibly understand." "Oh, I think I understand more than you might imagine," Miss Marple countered, her tone deceptively mild. "For instance, I know that the Phoenix Society was far more than just a gentleman's club, and I suspect that Mr. Thompson's disappearance has everything to do with whatever secrets they left behind." Captain Langley's jaw tightened, and for a moment Miss Marple thought he might lunge at her. Instead, he took a step back, his expression unreadable. "Be careful, madam," he warned. "Some secrets are best left buried." With that, he turned and melted into the darkness, leaving Miss Marple alone beneath the watchful spire of the church. The next morning, Miss Marple paid a visit to Reverend Cosgood, whose knowledge of local history was unparalleled. Over tea and scones in the vicarage parlour, she broached the subject of the churchyard's recent nocturnal visitor. "Strange goings-on indeed," the Reverend mused, stroking his beard thoughtfully, "though I must admit, the churchyard has long been a place of interest to outsiders. Did you know that during the war it was used as a drop point for clandestine messages? The hollow base of the old oak tree near the south wall served as a dead letterbox." Miss Marple's eyes lit up. How fascinating. Do you suppose anyone still uses it today? It's possible, Reverend Cosgood admitted, though I haven't noticed anything unusual myself. But, he hesitated, glancing toward the window as though ensuring no one was listening. There is one thing. A few weeks ago, I found a small metal cylinder lodged in the roots of the oak. Inside was a rolled-up piece of paper bearing a series of symbols, not unlike those you described finding in Mr. Thompson's calendar. Miss Marple leaned forward eagerly. And where is this message now? I burned it, I'm afraid, the Reverend confessed. It seemed safest, but I made a note of some of the symbols before doing so. He retrieved a scrap of paper from his desk drawer and handed it to her. She studied the hastily scribbled marks, circles, triangles, and dashes arranged in patterns eerily similar to those in the calendar. One sequence stood out, CTPR 1923. Could CTPR refer to the Central Trade Protection Registry, she wondered aloud, or perhaps it's an acronym for something else entirely? Reverend Cosgood shrugged. All I can tell you is that the symbols felt significant, almost ritualistic. Whoever left them knew exactly what they were doing. Miss Marple thanked him profusely and returned home to add this new clue to her growing collection. As she examined the scrap of paper alongside the calendar and notebook, a pattern began to emerge. Each coded entry corresponded to specific dates and locations, suggesting a network of communication that spanned both time and geography. Her attention was drawn once again to the initials VR embossed on the calendar's cover. Could these letters stand for Veritas Regnum, Truth Reigns, a motto often associated with intelligence agencies, or did they represent an individual, perhaps someone high-ranking within the Phoenix Society? Before she could delve deeper into these questions, a knock at the door startled her. Opening it, she found Constable Peters standing on the threshold, his face pale and anxious. "Miss Marple," he stammered, "there's been another development. A body was found in the woods near the edge of the village. The coroner believes it may be Mr. Thompson." Miss Marple felt a chill run down her spine. Was there any identification? Peters shook his head. No, but the clothing matches his description. And, he hesitated, swallowing hard, there was something clutched in his hand, a small brass key engraved with a phoenix emblem. Miss Marple's mind raced. If the body truly belonged to Mr. Thompson, then his death likely stemmed from his involvement in whatever secrets the Phoenix Society sought to protect. But if it didn't, "Constable," she said firmly, "we must examine the body immediately and locate that key. It may hold the answer to everything." As they set off toward the village hall, where the remains had been taken, Miss Marple couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn deeper into a labyrinth of deception and danger. 6 chapters remained, yet already the stakes had grown perilously high. Somewhere in the shadows, the truth awaited. But at what cost? The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 5. The Key to the Labyrinth. The village hall's dimly lit anteroom felt colder than usual as Miss Marple and Constable Peters stood before the covered body laid out on a makeshift examination table. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and beeswax candles, their flickering light casting restless shadows across the walls. Despite her years of experience unraveling mysteries, Miss Marple found herself hesitating before the grim task ahead. "Shall we proceed, miss?" Peters asked softly, his voice tinged with unease. Miss Marple nodded, steeling herself. "Yes, Constable, let us see what secrets this unfortunate soul has left behind." With trembling hands, Peters drew back the sheet. The face revealed beneath was pale and gaunt, its features partially obscured by dirt and bruising. Yet even in death, there was something familiar about the man, his neatly trimmed beard, the slight indentation above his left eyebrow where an old scar might have been. "It does resemble Mr. Thompson," Miss Marple murmured, leaning closer, "but appearances can be deceiving. We must confirm his identity beyond doubt." Her gaze shifted to the hand clutched tightly at his side. Gently prying open the stiffened fingers, she retrieved the brass key engraved with the phoenix emblem. Its surface bore faint scratches, as though it had been used recently, or perhaps struggled over. "This is no ordinary key," she observed, turning it over in her palm. "It's far too ornate for a simple lock. Perhaps it opens a safe or a vault of some kind. Peters frowned. Do you think it's connected to the hidden compartment in his shop? Possibly, Miss Marple replied thoughtfully, but given the circumstances, I suspect it leads somewhere else, somewhere more significant, somewhere tied to the Phoenix Society. She handed the key to Peters for safekeeping, then turned her attention to the clothing. The suit was plain but well made, its fabric marked with traces of soil and dried leaves. In the inner pocket, she discovered a folded piece of paper, an incomplete map, its edges singed as if salvaged from a fire. The map depicted a series of interconnected rooms labeled with cryptic symbols. Sanctuary, Archive, Chamber of Truth. How curious, she whispered, smoothing out the fragile parchment. This appears to be a blueprint, not of a house, but of some sort of underground facility. Peters peered over her shoulder, his brow furrowed. Could it be related to that gentleman's club in London, the one destroyed by the fire? It's quite possible, Miss Marple agreed. Though if this map survived the blaze, others may have done so as well, and whoever holds those maps holds the key to untold secrets. As they continued their examination, Miss Marple noticed another detail, a small tattoo on the man's wrist, a phoenix rising from flames, identical to the emblem on the key. This confirms it, she said firmly. Whoever this man was, he belonged to the Phoenix Society. Whether or not he is truly Mr. Thompson remains to be seen, but either way, his death is directly linked to their activities. Later that evening, Miss Marple returned home to pore over the new evidence. Spreading the map across her dining table, she compared it to the coded entries in the calendar and notebook. One symbol in particular caught her eye, a triangle surrounded by 3 dots, which appeared both on the map and in several of the calendar's markings. Beneath it in the notebook was a single word scrawled in shorthand, sanctuary. The sanctuary, she mused aloud. A place of refuge, or perhaps a hiding spot for something valuable. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Opening it, she found Reverend Cosgood standing on the threshold, his expression grave. Miss Marple, he began without preamble, I've just received word from a colleague in London. He mentioned hearing rumors about a secret archive tied to the Phoenix Society, one that supposedly survived the fire. They call it the Phoenix Vault. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. Go on, Reverend. He believes it contains documents of immense historical importance, possibly even classified intelligence gathered during the wars. But here's the troubling part. According to my source, someone has been trying to locate the vault recently. Several individuals connected to the search have gone missing under mysterious circumstances. And now we may have another victim, Miss Marple concluded grimly. If Mr. Thompson, or whoever this poor man is, was searching for the vault, his discovery could have cost him his life. Reverend Cosgood nodded solemnly. Indeed, my colleague also mentioned that access to the vault requires 2 keys, one engraved with a phoenix, the other with a serpent. Without both, entry is impossible. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Then whoever possesses the second key must be nearby and likely watching us very closely. After bidding the Reverend farewell, she returned to her study, her mind racing. If the Phoenix Vault truly existed, its contents could rewrite history or destroy lives. Yet finding it would require piecing together fragments of information scattered across decades. Her gaze fell upon the stack of letters recovered from Mr. Thompson's hidden compartment. Selecting one addressed to V.R., she carefully unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant yet hurried, the ink faded but legible. The time has come to secure the legacy. Ensure the archive remains intact until Operation Phoenix reaches fruition. Trust no one, not even those who wear the mark. Operation Phoenix, Miss Marple repeated softly, not merely a wartime initiative, but an ongoing mission. Whatever secrets lie within the vault, they are still active and dangerous. At that moment, the wind outside picked up, rattling the windows and sending a chill through the room. Miss Marple rose to draw the curtains, only to catch sight of a figure standing motionless beneath the street lamp outside. It was Captain Langley, his silhouette unmistakable despite the distance. For several long seconds, their eyes met through the glass. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared into the night. Miss Marple sighed, pulling the curtains shut. 5 chapters remain, she murmured to herself, and already the threads are tightening around us all. The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 6. The Serpent's Trail. The morning sun filtered weakly through the heavy clouds as Miss Marple set out on her daily walk, ostensibly to gather fresh air, but in truth to clear her thoughts. The previous night's encounter with Captain Langley had left her unsettled, and she needed time to process the implications of his silent vigil outside her home. Was he merely observing or warning? And what role did he play in the hunt for the Phoenix Vault? As she strolled along the familiar paths of St. Mary Mead, her mind wandered back to the map and the enigmatic references to the sanctuary and the Chamber of Truth. If the Phoenix Vault truly existed, and she had little reason to doubt it now, then its location must be hidden within those cryptic symbols. Yet without the second key, any attempt to access it would be futile. Her musings were interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Emily Cartwright, the young librarian, approaching with an anxious expression. "Miss Marple," Emily panted, clutching a folded piece of paper in her hand. "I found this slipped under the library door early this morning. It's addressed to you." Miss Marple accepted the note cautiously, noting the absence of a stamp or postmark. Unfolding it, she read the brief message scrawled in block letters. "Stop asking questions. The serpent guards what is forbidden." Beneath the text was a crude drawing of a snake coiled around a key. "How curious," Miss Marple murmured, though her calm demeanor masked a growing unease. "Did anyone see who left it?" Emily shook her head. "No, but whoever it was knew exactly where to find me, and apparently knows about your investigations." Miss Marple thanked her and tucked the note into her pocket, her mind already working through the implications. The reference to the serpent was unmistakable. It could only mean the second key required to unlock the Phoenix Vault. But who had sent the warning? And why go to such lengths to intimidate her when she was still so far from uncovering the vault's secrets? Later that afternoon, Miss Marple paid a visit to Mrs. Hargreaves, hoping the former postmistress might shed light on the significance of the serpent emblem. The elderly woman greeted her warmly, though her smile faded when Miss Marple showed her the threatening note. "The serpent," Mrs. Hargreaves whispered, her hands trembling slightly. "Yes, I remember it well. During the war, certain operatives used the serpent as their calling card, a symbol of secrecy and protection. Those who bore it were said to guard the most sensitive information." "And do you recall anyone specific associated with this emblem?" Miss Marple pressed gently. Mrs. Hargreaves hesitated, glancing toward the window as if expecting someone to appear. "There was one man, a courier who came to the post office often. He always wore a silver ring shaped like a serpent devouring its own tail. His name was Mr. Grayson, though I suspect that wasn't his real name. He disappeared shortly after the fire at the Phoenix Society." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Grayson, could he have been involved in safeguarding the second key?" "It's possible," Mrs. Hargreaves admitted. "But if he's still alive and still guarding the serpent key, then you're dealing with someone extremely dangerous. These men didn't earn their reputations by being careless." That evening, Miss Marple attended the weekly Women's Guild meeting at the village hall, determined to maintain her routine despite the mounting tension. As the ladies gathered around the tea table, exchanging gossip and knitting patterns, she listened intently, knowing how often vital information could slip unnoticed in casual conversation. Sure enough, Mrs. Bantry leaned in conspiratorially during a lull in the chatter. "You'll never guess what Arthur told me last night. He works part-time at the train station, you know. A stranger arrived yesterday evening, claiming to be an antique dealer looking for rare coins. But here's the odd thing. He asked specifically about a coin bearing a serpent motif." "A serpent motif?" Miss Marple echoed, her interest piqued. "Yes, and get this. The man offered an absurd amount of money for it, saying it was part of a collection." Arthur thought it all rather suspicious. Miss Marple excused herself shortly afterward, her mind racing. Could this mysterious coin collector be connected to the search for the serpent key? And if so, had he come to St. Mary Mead seeking not just coins, but something far more valuable? Returning home, she lit a fire in the hearth and spread her notes across the coffee table. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to align. The phoenix emblem, the serpent key, the coded messages, the map, and now the mention of a serpent motif coin. Each clue pointed toward a single conclusion. The Phoenix Vault was closer than she had imagined, perhaps even hidden somewhere within reach. But as she studied the map once more, another detail caught her eye. A faint pencil mark near the edge of the parchment, partially obscured by a coffee stain. Squinting, she realized it was a series of numbers, coordinates written in tiny, precise handwriting. Coordinates, she whispered, her pulse quickening. Could these lead us to the sanctuary? Grabbing a magnifying glass, she examined the numbers closely. They appeared to correspond to a grid system, likely referencing a location on the map itself. Tracing her finger along the lines, she pinpointed the spot, a small unmarked square near the center of the blueprint, labeled simply as Access Point. Her excitement was tempered by caution. Whoever controlled the serpent key would surely be watching for anyone attempting to locate the vault. To proceed recklessly would be to risk everything, and possibly endanger others in the process. Yet as she sat there, poring over the evidence, a sudden realization struck her. The calendar, the notebook, the map, all were tools designed to guide someone toward the truth. And if Mr. Thompson had entrusted her with these items, then perhaps he had anticipated precisely this moment. 4 chapters remain, she murmured aloud, gazing into the flickering flames, and the serpent's trail grows colder with each passing hour. But somewhere out there lies the key to unlocking the past, and perhaps preventing a tragedy yet to come. The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 7. The Coin Collector. The following morning, Miss Marple made her way to St. Mary Mead's modest train station, a building that seemed to embody the quiet charm of the village itself. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of coal smoke and polished wood, and the rhythmic ticking of the old clock on the wall provided a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. At the ticket counter stood Arthur Bantry, his spectacles perched precariously on the tip of his nose as he pored over a ledger. "Good morning, Arthur," Miss Marple greeted him warmly. "I hear you've had an interesting visitor recently." Arthur looked up, startled but pleased to see her. "Ah, Miss Marple. Yes, indeed, a most peculiar fellow. Came in yesterday asking about coins of all things. Said he was an antique dealer, though I couldn't help noticing how nervous he seemed. Kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to follow him." Miss Marple leaned closer, her expression one of mild curiosity. "Did he mention anything specific about the coin he sought?" Arthur nodded, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "He described it as a gold sovereign stamped with a serpent motif. Quite rare, apparently. But here's the strange part. When I told him we hadn't seen anything like it in years, he offered me a ridiculous sum just for information about anyone who might have sold such a coin recently." "How intriguing," Miss Marple murmured, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly. "And did you happen to notice where he went after leaving the station?" "He mentioned needing to check the local shops," Arthur replied, "but I doubt he found what he was looking for around here. Still, there's something about him that doesn't sit right. He gave me a business card before he left. It's upstairs in my office if you'd care to see it." Moments later, Miss Marple held the card in her hand. It bore the name Reginald Grayson, antiquarian and numismatist, along with an address in London. Beneath the text was a small embossed emblem. A serpent coiled around a key. "A serpent and a key," she whispered softly, tucking the card into her handbag. "How very fitting." Returning home, Miss Marple spread her notes across the dining table once more, placing the business card alongside the map and the threatening note. The connections were becoming clearer by the hour. Mr. Grayson, or whoever he truly was undoubtedly searching for the serpent key. And judging by his behavior, he believed it might be hidden somewhere in or near St. Mary Mead. Her gaze drifted to the coordinates marked on the map. If the access point indicated a physical location, then it stood to reason that the sanctuary, and possibly the Phoenix Vault itself, was nearby. But without both keys, any attempt to reach it would be futile. As she pondered this, a knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Opening it, she found Constable Peters standing on the threshold, his face pale and drawn. "Miss Marple," he began breathlessly. There's been another incident. A break-in at the home of Mrs. Hargreaves. Miss Marple's heart sank. Is she all right? She's shaken but unharmed, Peters assured her. However, several items were taken, including a box of old letters and a silver locket she kept hidden in her bureau. She says they belonged to her late husband, who worked as a courier during the war. Miss Marple's mind raced. Could the stolen items contain clues related to the Serpent Key, or had they simply been collateral damage in a broader search? We must speak with her immediately, she declared, grabbing her shawl. At Mrs. Hargreaves's cottage, the elderly woman sat wrapped in a blanket, her hands trembling as she recounted the events of the night. It happened so quickly, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. I woke to the sound of breaking glass and saw a figure rifling through my belongings. When I called out, he fled, but not before snatching the box and the locket. Miss Marple frowned thoughtfully. Did you recognize him? Mrs. Hargreaves shook her head. No, but I caught a glimpse of something shiny on his finger, a ring shaped like a serpent. The same ring worn by Mr. Grayson, Miss Marple mused aloud. This confirms it. Whoever is searching for the Serpent Key knows exactly where to look, and isn't afraid to use force to get what they want. She turned her attention to the remnants of the ransacked bureau, sifting through scattered papers until she found a single sheet that had escaped the intruder's notice. It was a faded letter addressed to Mrs. Hargreaves' late husband, its contents partially obscured by water damage. Yet one phrase stood out clearly. The Serpent Key lies within the archive, guarded by the Keeper of Secrets. The Keeper of Secrets, Miss Marple repeated softly, her pulse quickening. Could this refer to a person, or perhaps a mechanism designed to protect the vault? Before she could delve deeper into the implications, a sudden noise outside drew their attention. Peering through the window, they saw a shadowy figure retreating into the woods beyond the garden. Stay here, Miss Marple instructed firmly, rising to her feet. Ignoring Peter's protests, she slipped quietly into the night, her torch casting a narrow beam of light across the dewy grass. The figure moved swiftly, disappearing between the trees, but not before dropping something metallic onto the ground. Retrieving it, Miss Marple discovered a small brass token engraved with yet another phoenix emblem. This changes everything, she whispered, clutching the token tightly. Whoever is behind this knows far more than we do, and they're determined to keep it that way. Back at home, Miss Marple examined the token under lamplight, comparing it to the other artifacts she had collected. Its design matched the keyholes on the map's access point, suggesting it served as some form of verification device. 3 chapters remain, she murmured to herself, her gaze fixed on the map, and the serpent grows ever closer. But even serpents can be outwitted, if one knows their habits. The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 8. The Keeper of Secrets. The storm that had been brewing all morning finally broke as Miss Marple sat in her drawing room, the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows providing a somber counterpoint to her thoughts. Spread before her on the table were the artifacts she had gathered. The brass token, the business card bearing the serpent and key emblem, the map with its cryptic coordinates, and the threatening note. Each piece seemed to whisper fragments of a story, yet the full narrative remained tantalizingly out of reach. Her gaze lingered on the phrase scrawled in the stolen letter. The Serpent Key lies within the archive, guarded by the Keeper of Secrets. Who or what was this keeper? Was it a person tasked with safeguarding the vault, or perhaps an elaborate security mechanism designed to thwart intruders? And how did the brass token fit into the equation? A sudden knock at the door interrupted her musings. Opening it, she found Reverend Cosgood standing on the threshold, his umbrella dripping steadily onto the doormat. Miss Marple, he began without preamble, I've just received word from my colleague in London. He's uncovered something extraordinary, a journal belonging to one of the original members of the Phoenix Society. It mentions a secret meeting held in St. Mary Mead during the war years. Miss Marple's eyes widened. Here, in our village? Yes, Reverend Cosgood confirmed. Apparently the society used a network of safe houses scattered across England to store classified documents. One such location was said to be near here, a place known only as the Sanctuary. The Sanctuary, Miss Marple repeated softly, recalling the label on the map. Could it refer to the same structure indicated by the coordinates? It's certainly possible, the Reverend replied. But there's more. According to the journal, the Keeper of Secrets was not a single individual, but rather a rotating position held by trusted members of the society. Their role was to ensure that no unauthorized person could access the vault, and to eliminate any threats if necessary. Miss Marple felt a chill run down her spine. Then whoever holds that title now would stop at nothing to protect the vault's secrets. Reverend Cosgood nodded gravely. Indeed, my colleague believes the current keeper may still reside in St. Mary Mead, blending into the community while keeping watch over the sanctuary. Later that afternoon, Miss Marple ventured to the churchyard once more, drawn by the need to think clearly amidst the quiet solemnity of the groves. Umbrella in hand, she wandered among the weathered headstones, her mind replaying the events of the past few days. As she approached the ancient oak tree near the south wall, she noticed something unusual, a fresh patch of disturbed earth beneath its sprawling roots. Kneeling carefully, she brushed away the loose soil with her gloved hands, revealing a small metal box partially buried in the ground. Her heart quickened as she opened it, finding inside a bundle of papers wrapped in oilcloth. Unfolding them, she discovered a series of sketches depicting intricate mechanisms, locks, gears, and pressure plates, all annotated with detailed instructions. At the center of each diagram was the image of a serpent coiled around a keyhole. This must be part of the vault's security system, she whispered, her fingers tracing the delicate lines of ink. Instructions for the Keeper of Secrets. Among the papers was a handwritten note addressed simply to the next Guardian. Its contents sent a shiver through her. To those who follow, remember your duty. The Phoenix Vault contains truths too dangerous for mortal hands. Should the keys reunite, the Chamber of Truth will open. But beware, for what lies within may consume us all. Miss Marple folded the note thoughtfully, her mind racing. If the Keeper of Secrets truly existed, then they were likely aware of her discoveries, and possibly preparing to act. That evening, as she prepared tea in her cozy kitchen, another knock sounded at the door. This time, it was Captain Langley, his face grim and unyielding. "We need to talk," he said without preamble, stepping inside despite her hesitation. "About what, Captain?" Miss Marple asked coolly, gesturing for him to take a seat. "About the danger you're courting," he replied sharply. "You've been meddling in matters far beyond your understanding. The Phoenix Vault is not meant to be opened, not by you nor anyone else." "And why is that?" she countered, her tone deceptively mild. "What truths are so perilous that they must remain hidden?" Langley leaned forward, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. Truths that could topple governments, destroy reputations, and unravel the fabric of society itself. The Phoenix Society was created to protect these secrets, and I am its last remaining member. Miss Marple studied him carefully, noting the tension in his jaw and the slight tremor in his hands. "Then you must be the Keeper of Secrets." For a moment he said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then with a sigh he nodded. "Yes, and I have failed in my duty. Someone else knows of the vault's existence, and they seek to claim it for themselves." "Mr. Grayson," Miss Marple surmised. Langley's eyes narrowed. "If you mean the man posing as an antique dealer, then yes. But he is merely a pawn in a larger game. There are others pulling the strings, powerful individuals who will stop at nothing to unlock the Chamber of Truth." "And what of Mr. Thompson?" she pressed gently. "Was he also a pawn, or something more?" Langley hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "Arthur Thompson was once a loyal member of the society, entrusted with safeguarding the Phoenix Key, but when he fled to St. Mary Mead, he brought with him knowledge that should never have left the vault. His death was inevitable." Miss Marple absorbed this revelation in silence, her thoughts turning to the map and the coordinates. "Tell me, Captain, if I were to locate the sanctuary, would you stand in my way?" Langley rose abruptly, his chair scraping against the floorboards. "Do not test me, Miss Marple. Some doors are better left closed." With that, he turned and strode out into the rain, leaving her alone with her questions, and 2 chapters yet to unfold. The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 9. The Threshold of Truth. The rain had ceased by morning, leaving the village cloaked in a damp silver mist that clung to the hedgerows and glistened on cobblestone paths. Miss Marple stood at her window, gazing out at the quiet world beyond, her mind a whirlpool of thoughts. Captain Langley's revelation weighed heavily upon her. The knowledge that she was not merely unraveling a mystery, but stepping into a perilous game, with consequences far greater than she had anticipated. Yet, as always, her curiosity burned brighter than her caution. The map, the coordinates, the brass token, all pointed toward an inevitable confrontation. And if the sanctuary truly housed the Phoenix Vault, then it was imperative that she reach it before Mr. Grayson or his shadowy masters could claim its secrets for themselves. Her resolve hardened as she recalled the handwritten note found beneath the oak tree. What lies within may consume us all. Dangerous truths indeed, but were they more dangerous hidden away, guarded by those who wielded power without accountability? Or exposed to the light, where they might spark chaos and upheaval? With a deep breath, Miss Marple gathered her belongings, the calendar, the notebook, the map, and the brass token. She slipped them into a sturdy satchel, along with a flashlight, matches, and a small pocket-knife. Then, donning her warmest coat and sturdiest shoes, she set off toward the location indicated by the coordinates. The journey took her through fields and woodlands, past familiar landmarks now shrouded in an unfamiliar stillness. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, their songs muffled by the lingering mist, while the occasional rustle of leaves hinted at unseen movement. Miss Marple walked briskly, her senses attuned to every sound and shadow. When she finally reached the site marked on the map, she found herself standing before a crumbling stone structure half consumed by ivy and time. It appeared to be the ruins of an old chapel, its arched doorway sagging slightly under the weight of centuries. Above the entrance, carved into the weathered stone, was the unmistakable emblem of a phoenix rising from flames. "This must be it," she murmured, her pulse quickening. "The sanctuary." Pushing open the creaking door, she stepped inside, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The interior was sparse but undeniably purposeful. Rows of pews had been removed, replaced by what looked like reinforced flooring. In the center of the space stood a pedestal bearing a single keyhole, flanked by 2 serpent motifs. Miss Marple approached cautiously, examining the mechanism. It bore the same design as the diagrams she'd discovered beneath the oak tree. Producing the brass token from her satchel, she inserted it into a slot beside the keyhole. A soft click echoed through the chamber, followed by the grinding of gears deep within the walls. A section of the floor slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Taking a steadying breath, Miss Marple began her descent, her footsteps echoing hollowly in the confined space. The air grew cooler and damper as she went, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and metal. At the bottom, she emerged into a dimly lit corridor lined with heavy iron doors, each marked with symbols identical to those in the calendar and notebook. One door stood slightly ajar, its surface engraved with the words, "Chamber of Truth." Beyond it lay another room, dominated by a massive vault-like structure. Its surface was covered in intricate carvings, depicting serpents, phoenixes, and other arcane symbols. At its center were 2 keyholes, one shaped like a phoenix, the other like a serpent. Miss Marple hesitated, her heart pounding. She possessed only one of the required keys. To proceed further without the serpent key would be impossible, or so she thought. As she examined the vault, something caught her eye, a panel concealed within the carvings, barely visible unless viewed from a specific angle. Pressing it gently, she revealed a hidden compartment containing a folded piece of parchment. Unfolding it, she read the message scrawled in faded ink. "To those who seek, remember, the serpent bows only to wisdom. Solve the riddle, and the path shall open." Beneath the text was a cryptic poem. "I speak without a tongue, I move without legs. Born of fire, yet quenched by water. What am I?" Miss Marple frowned thoughtfully. Riddles were often used as additional safeguards in such mechanisms designed to test the intellect of anyone attempting to gain access. This one, however, seemed deceptively simple. A flame, she whispered aloud, born of fire, extinguished by water. No sooner had she spoken the word than the serpent-shaped keyhole emitted a soft glow, and the vault's surface shifted subtly. A secondary panel slid open, revealing a touch-sensitive keypad etched with numbers and letters. It seemed the serpent key was not the only means of unlocking the Chamber of Truth. Before she could attempt to decipher the keypad's function, a voice startled her from behind. "You shouldn't be here." Turning sharply, Miss Marple saw Captain Langley standing in the doorway, his expression taut with anger and fear. "I warned you," he said, advancing slowly. "Some doors are better left closed." "And some truths are better brought into the light," Miss Marple countered firmly. "Why protect secrets that serve only to harm?" Langley sighed wearily. "Because humanity cannot handle the full weight of its own history. What lies within this vault? It will destroy everything you hold dear." Miss Marple met his gaze steadily. "Then let me decide for myself whether the risk is worth taking." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, with visible reluctance, Langley stepped aside. "Very well," he said quietly, "but when the serpent rises, do not say I did not warn you." With that, he turned and disappeared back up the staircase, leaving Miss Marple alone before the vault. One chapter remained, and with it the final revelation awaited. The Secrets of the Old Calendar. Chapter 10. The Phoenix's Truth. The silence in the Chamber of Truth was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the vault's mechanisms as they responded to Miss Marple's touch. She stood before the keypad, her mind racing through possibilities. The riddle had been solved. A flame, but what awaited her now? What combination of intellect and intuition would unlock the final barrier? Her gaze fell upon the old calendar still tucked safely in her satchel. Its pages, once so cryptic, now seemed like a roadmap leading inexorably to this moment. Flipping it open, she noticed something she'd overlooked before, faint indentations on the back cover, as though someone had pressed hard while writing atop it. Holding it up to the dim light, she deciphered a sequence of numbers and letters etched into the leather. "Of course," she murmured, realization dawning. "This isn't merely a calendar, it's also a cipher." Cross-referencing the markings with the symbols carved into the vault, she began entering the sequence into the keypad. Each input triggered a low chime, resonating through the chamber like the tolling of distant bells. When the last character was entered, the vault exhaled, a deep mechanical sigh, and the massive door swung inward with a groan of ancient hinges. Inside lay not gold or jewels, but rows upon rows of meticulously organized documents, photographs, and artifacts. At the center of the chamber rested a single wooden box adorned with the phoenix emblem. Opening it, Miss Marple found a ledger bound in crimson leather, its pages filled with entries detailing events spanning decades. Spies unmasked, scandals suppressed, betrayals concealed. Some names were familiar, others belonged to figures long forgotten by history. But one entry stood out above all others. Operation Phoenix, a contingency plan implemented during wartime to safeguard classified intelligence from enemy forces. Should peace fail, these records will ensure accountability among those who wield power, to be entrusted solely to individuals capable of discernment and moral fortitude. Miss Marple closed the ledger slowly, her thoughts heavy with the implications. These documents held the potential to expose corruption on a global scale, but also to incite chaos if mishandled. Was humanity ready for such truths? Or would their revelation lead only to further division and destruction? As she pondered this, footsteps echoed behind her. Turning, she saw Captain Langley reappear, his face pale but resolute. "You've done it," he said quietly. "You've opened Pandora's box." "Perhaps," Miss Marple replied, her tone measured. "But whether it brings ruin or redemption depends on how we choose to use what lies within." Langley shook his head bitterly. "And who decides that? You? Me? The same institutions that created these secrets in the first place?" "No," Miss Marple answered firmly. "The people. The truth belongs to them, not to governments, nor societies, nor any individual. It is their right to know, and their burden to bear. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Langley stepped forward, his eyes searching hers. "What do you propose to do with it?" Miss Marple considered carefully. "I propose nothing rash. These records must be reviewed, verified, and released incrementally, lest they overwhelm, but kept hidden? Never again." Langley nodded reluctantly, his shoulders sagging under the weight of resignation. "Then I leave it in your hands, Miss Marple. May God grant you wisdom." With that, he turned and departed, leaving her alone amidst the echoes of history. In the weeks that followed, Miss Marple worked tirelessly, enlisting trusted allies, including Reverend Cosgood and Constable Peters, to help sift through the contents of the vault. Documents were catalogued, photographs archived, and artifacts preserved. Slowly but surely, fragments of the truth began to emerge, shedding light on injustices long buried and heroes long unsung. Yet even as the world began to reckon with these revelations, Miss Marple remained acutely aware of the delicate balance between transparency and consequence. Not everything could or should be made public immediately. Some secrets required context, others demanded patience. One evening, as she sat by her fireplace reviewing the ledger, a knock at the door interrupted her solitude. Opening it, she found an unexpected visitor, Mr. Reginald Grayson, his serpent ring glinting in the lamplight. "It seems I underestimated you, Miss Marple," he admitted, his voice tinged with grudging admiration. "The vault is secure, then?" "As secure as it can be," she replied calmly, "though I suspect you'll find little of value remaining within." Grayson studied her intently, then nodded. "Perhaps this is for the best. Power unchecked breeds tyranny, but so too does knowledge without restraint." With that, he tipped his hat and disappeared into the night, leaving Miss Marple to reflect on the fragile equilibrium she had helped restore. Months later, life in St. Mary Mead returned to its usual rhythm. The churchyard grew quiet once more, the antiques shop changed hands, and whispers of the Phoenix Society faded into legend. Yet Miss Marple knew better than anyone that the past was never truly gone. It lingered, waiting to be rediscovered by those brave enough to seek it. As she closed the crimson ledger for the final time, she allowed herself a small smile. The truth, however perilous, had been brought into the light. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, she took comfort in knowing that wisdom, courage, and integrity could guide humanity toward a brighter future. After all, even the darkest shadows could not extinguish the flame of